Okay, can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Oh, whoop, whoop. Hang on, I messed that up. Hang on, just touch. There you go. Can you see that now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so what we're going to do today is go through the buy-sell contract. And as a new agent, I can guarantee you that if you follow how I tell you to write them, you will not, if you get rejected, it won't be the way you wrote the offer, okay? It will be on something else. So for us, we have the, this is the documentation you need to command. So once you get through your inspection, objection, and a resolution, then you upload everything into command and send it to me to review. And then once I review it and give its approval, then you've done your DA, your distribution authorization, so that you can get paid at the table, then you will, when you go to closing, your check will be there. So, but I do highly encourage that if you to engage a transaction coordinator. They're anywhere from $300 to $500, and you don't get paid till you close. So it makes your life a whole lot easier. I've got a name of somebody that's real good, and she's familiar with the Keller Williams systems. So just let me know, and I'll send you her name. Okay, so here are the documents we need. So when you have a buyer, you have brokerage disclosure to buyer or definitions of working relationship. Either one is fine. You have your buyer agency agreement. You have the buyer advisory. Now, if you change status from buyer to transaction broker, there is a document called change of status. It usually is never used, but in case you need it, it is there. Now, once you go under contract and you found your property, you need the lender letter. Hopefully you got one. The MLS printout sheet saying the property is under contract. Real estate information for the seller, that tells you who the seller is, and basic information about the property. If there's a counter, you put that in. Copy of the earnest money receipt and check. Inspection, objection, and inspection resolution. So once you get that done, then you can start uploading documents. The other side will give you the seller's property disclosure, square foot disclosure, source of water may or may not be in there, and closing instructions may or may not be there. These two documents is when you get a lazy agent, they don't usually fill them out very well, or they choose not to do them at all. If the house falls into the lead-based paint timeframe, which is January 1st, 1978, you will get a lead-based paint disclosure. Sometimes you have a post-closing occupancy agreement that says the seller can stay in the property after, no matter if it's 1 or 6, up to 60. You have to have that document. Earnest money promissory notes are hardly ever used. Commission agreements usually are for sale by owners or new home construction. They have their own agreement. We're not into short sales yet. And I underline the word yet because I believe next year you're going to see some of those come back, not in the force that we had before, but it could be. Now, once you have all of these documents set up, and once you've submitted, then go to the button once you submit to command where it says commission request and fill that out. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call Bonnie or Amy. Once your property closes, then the title company is going to send you, and I would ask them to do it in email form. And then you have copies of the checks or a distribution sheet. You upload to the appropriate place, the MLS sold sheet. And then if there's repairs or any documentation, you can put it at the bottom of your documentation in command. So that's what the checklist. So you can go in and copy all of this. It is, if you go into resources, Park Meadows, and go over to contracts and click on that, everything we talk about in each class is there, and you can just print it and use it as your sheet to when you're trying to fill something out. This is the definitions of working relationship. It's pretty self-explanatory, and you can just fill it out and go from there. That's the first document that you have a buyer sign. Second document is your buyer agency agreement. Most agents are buyer agents. You check number 2.1, multiple person office, and that way it's always, because we have more than one person. You get the buyer's legal name, because that will transfer over to your contract. And so you want to be sure you have their legal name. It should be automatically filled in for Keller Williams Real Estate LLC and your name. You can either use, excuse me, DocuSign, or, which is free, and then CTME is $28 a month. So that'll, when you set it up, that'll be there along with setting up your signatures on a document. Always on 3.4, put this statement in. It's buyer's next principal residence, whether from the MLS, multi-listing service, FSBO, for sale by owner, property, investment property, you can put and land, or new home builder. This way you're covering the whole gamut of what you could get paid for or get paid on, okay? Then on 3.6 is your beginning and ending date on your agency agreement. I would suggest strongly that you put in 6 months on this, because even though we have more property on the MLS now, it still may take you 1 or 2 or 3 properties to get to the property that is appropriate for your buyers, okay? So now on 3.8.2, this is called the holdover period. I'm sorry, it will be the period in which, if the date you've put in the contract falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday, you're going to move to the next day. I always put will, but it's either one is what's up to you. Number 4 is your broker relationship. You always want to check 4.3.1.2, buyer agency only. This is the means that you only represent the buyer. You don't have anything else to do with the seller or anything else. Then on 5, these are all your broker duties that you need to do. And you don't have to memorize them, but you just want to be familiar with them. Then on number 6, when you check the box at the top of this contract, you have 3 additional duties. If you're going to get fired, this is usually where your additional duties are going to come from. Promoting the interest of the buyer, seeking price and terms, and then counseling the buyer. Hang on just a second. Counseling the buyer as to material facts and risks or things like that. Again, if you're going to get fired, these are the 3 they're going to probably hang their hat on. You didn't do something for me is usually what happens. So on 7 is your compensation. So you want your success to be, and you want to put 2.8. You're going to find some agents will pay 2, some agents pay 2.5, some pay 3, some pay, builders may pay 3.5, whatever. I've never gone back on a buyer to pay me the difference if it's a 2 or 2.3 or 5 or 6 or something like that. I just take whatever the advertised amount is, and that's what I live with, okay? That's my choice, but if you want to ask your buyer for the difference, that is also something you can do. Then on 7.112, where you have others, any bonuses or greater commission should be paid to Keller Williams Real Estate LLC at the time of closing. So it might be a new home build that is offering the agent an extra $2,000 or something of that nature, and it will come to you through us. Now then we go down to, is there anything else? So 7.1.4 other compensation, none at this time. So be specific when you fill this out, guys, okay? Then when you do your 7.2.4, this is your lease. I put it in there to make sure everybody stays honest, and that way you don't have to, if you do a lease, sometimes you might do it, but it's not very often. But I would put it in there anyway, just to be on the safe side in case something happens. Then on 7.3.1 is it says that the listing firm or seller may pay commission. Buyer is obligated. I always check that. Some buyers bulk at it, and if there's a change, then say buyer will, you can uncheck it. I've never asked a buyer to pay the difference, but that's up to you guys. Then 7.4 is the holdover period. You can put anywhere between 30 and 120 days, whatever works for you. And you will get a success fee on whatever you've shown them, because you might show one buyer 10 properties. And if he gets frustrated with you and fires you, and then they go back to one of the houses you shown, then you better be sure you keep that paperwork so you know if somebody went back without you. That doesn't happen very often. It does once in a great while. Then on the number 9 is the buyer's obligation to broker. They're not in agreement with any other broker and have not received a list, submitted the properties that they have viewed prior to coming to you as their representative. On 10.1, buyers have a right to cancel, agents have a right to cancel, but you want to consult with me before you ever fire a buyer. But I'm probably going to tell you there's no reason to keep a buyer if they're unhappy. It's just not worth the aggravation. There really isn't. So on 2.1, have any additional services at this time? What kind of showing instructions is as per the MLS instructions? And where are you showing it? Where are you showing property? Multi-listing service in the metro area, but it could be it could be in Iris, it could be in PPAR, that's Colorado Springs. So know where your buyer wants to be. Make sure you in your consultation that you've asked them, where do you figure you'd like to live? If you go to the high country, you have to be confident in the area in which you sell, and most agents are not. I would highly recommend that you make a referral. You have buyer's disclosure. Yes, I have the permission to disclose the buyer's identity. This is in here in case when my husband and I used to sell, we had actors and we had athletes and things like that. When we would go on a showing, we did not always reveal who the person was. Most of the time it's not a problem, but you want to be sure you check the box does at this point, unless somebody has expressed an opinion that they don't like them. So 11 all the way down to 20 is self-explanatory. Pretty reasonable. Just make sure you understand it. What happens in mediation and those kinds of things. Now, I don't put too many things in additional provisions, but one is that you might have a transaction broker. You can put the name in there, who's going to handle all the paperwork or something like that. Most of the time, it's not got anything in there, so you just want to leave it none at this time, but you might want to put that transaction coordinator's name in there and number and stuff. What's attached to this agreement is your buyer advisory and definitions of working relationship. This is the second piece in the first email. So number 23 all the way down to 28, again, is pretty self-explanatory. And then the buyer side, your signature should already be on there. And the information when you set up your contract program, all of this should be filled in at that time. Then your next document, which comes from our in-house attorney, is the buyer advisory. So you have that autopilot, you can put that in here for your buyer advisory. And it's 6 pages long. This is, Damien put all this together. It's about insurance, surveys, short sales, title work, home warranties, you name it is in here. And this is super important for the buyer to read and understand. They're entitled to any kind of inspection, all kinds of things here. Have them sign it, and then you sign it down here. Now here's our buy-sell contract. Our buy-sell contract is you start with your date over here. Now let me stop here. You have you have one email that you send after your consultation with your buyer. That is your definitions of working relationship or broker acknowledgement. Then you have, along with that, you've got your buyer agency agreement and you've got your buyer advisory from the attorney. That's the first email that goes to a buyer. And that's done as you sit down and do your consultation. You get that out of the way, that's already signed. Now your next step is you're going to go out and find a house. I would strongly suggest that you have an agency agreement in place before you show a house. If you show a house without it being in place, I would not show a second house without having this in place, okay? So now we get to the buy-sell contract. Now you have already populated is your buyer's legal names. They're going in joint tenants or tenants in common or other. Joint tenants is right of survivorship. Tenants in common is usually a percentage. That's usually used if it's a second marriage and there's a percentage to be split. Other is usually either a single person or severalty, whichever you want to put in there. Now you have this name of those sellers, which comes off your realist documentation in RE Colorado. You also have what county the property's in and the legal description of the property and the address of the property. And what comes with the property. You ask them, how many remote controls do they have? If they've got one garage door opener, two garage door openers, or three, you put it, be specific. How many do they have? Whatever else is included in here. If none of these little boxes are needed, you don't have to check them. Then you have other inclusions. This is where you are as specific about what's included as possible. Freestanding gas stove, GE electric refrigerator, both located in the kitchen, the GE ice maker located in the basement, whatever it is, be specific. If you don't know what the brand is, that's okay. Just say it's an electric or gas stove. A microwave is there, dishwasher, whatever you see is in there, put that in here. So now encumbrances are none, even though I checked the box solar, there's no encumbrances, it's owned free and clear. If you have parking facilities on 2.5.6, I ask you to put in, I can see it's a 3-car attached garage, but a lot of times when you're going to make an offer on a condo, you'll blow past this and there might be a reserve spot or there could be a parking garage or something that it goes with that. If you don't ask for it, you don't get it. So if there's a shed in the back or anything that conveys as far as storage, could be a storage a closet or something of that nature, be specific. Because if you leave it out, then it's going to be a fight in the future to get that kind of stuff back. So solar lease for the solar panels are currently installed on the property. All righty, so we're telling them it's leased, it's not owned. And we've got the court, do you want to research the proper paperwork for that? What's excluded is the washer dryer located in the upstairs laundry room. And that will tell you where their laundry is located. And if it's in a basement, in a closet on the first floor, or wherever it is, again, be specific. Normally in a normal residential area, you don't have any water rights, but if you have a property that would be like acreage, it could or could not have water rights. And so you wanted to, right now, all of this is none, but there could be something in the future where you have a property that does have water rights or mineral rights. Then on 2.7.6 is the review. No, you don't have any water rights, so you don't have to worry about any termination as you're writing this offer. Dates we will go through next week. Then we go down to paragraph 333, and then this is your dates and deadlines. Again, you can check the box that says will go to a over past a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday. So now we have the purchase price. Now we have earnest money, what the loan amount, because you got that from the lender, and what they have to bring to closing. This happens to be about 20% down. Your column A and your column B have to add up. 4.2 is if you're asking the seller for seller concessions. Let's say the property was listed at 440 and you need $10,000 in seller concession. So you're bumping up your price so that the seller will net the proper amount that he or she is looking for. You have earnest money on 4.3. It's your personal check. Who are you making it out to? And then you make sure that you get it there on your timely deadline. What happens with your alternative earnest money deadline and any disputes? This paragraph goes into all of this. Everybody has to have good funds at the time of closing. 4.4.3 is your funds available. That doesn't mean that your house is under contract and you're waiting to close. It means I don't have anything to sell and the lender and I have got the money together to do this. If you check this box and says you do, and then you end up knowing that you don't, it could be considered fraud. So just be careful how you check this box. Then on, excuse me, on 4.5.3, what kind of loan are you getting? Don't check all of them, just check one. It's usually conventional FHA or VA. That's important to make sure you know what kind of loan your buyer is going to get. You need to make sure they've talked to a lender and that they have an approval letter from the lender. You're not doing an assumption or a seller or private financing, and you can delete those paragraphs in CTME. And I think you can do the same thing in DocuSign, but I'm not 100% sure. Number 5 is you're getting a new loan, and we'll talk next week about the application deadline, the loan terms and loan availability, and what that means and how you have to protect your buyer's earnest money. We don't have existing loan reviews, so now we go to appraisals. The first part of this is a conventional appraisal. If you're doing an FHA, you must fill in a number here that is on paragraph 4. So if I'm offering 450 and it's going FHA, I put 450 here. VA, FHA and VA state that if the buyer, if the property doesn't come in and agree on the agreed upon selling price, then what will happen is that the buyer of an FHA and VA loan do not have to go through with the deal. In reality, everybody tries to work through it, but they don't have to. The first part of this is a conventional one, which says basically the same thing. You don't have to go through it if you don't want, but you can negotiate. Then the cost of the appraisal is usually borne by the buyer. Now, paragraph 7, all of this paragraph comes from the listing agent. What is included, what's there, what about the HOA, if there's an HOA. These all have to be given to the buyer. And if there's not, then you need to say, hey, we don't get them. I usually get them from the title company if I list a property. That way I know everything that we can get is there. Cost about $150 to do that to a seller. So now 8 is on your title insurance. Who's going to pay? If I represent the buyer, it's always 8.1.1. I check that one. If you check 8.1.2, that means the buyer pays for their title insurance and the seller, which adds somewhere between $1,800 and $2,200 additional to a buyer. So be careful which box you're going to check. 8.1.3, you always check, and it's always will. It's only about $35 to get the owner in coverage, which means anybody who wants to put a lien on the property, well, the day before, the day of, or the day after closing, you're covered. If you don't, it can create a whole lot of problems for the buyer. Not normally the seller, but it can cause a lot of buyer problems. You want to know who wants to pay it. It could be 50-50 or the seller. I always check seller if I represent the buyer. The rest of this is dealing with title work, copy of the title, any existing abstracts are not normally, you get them every once in a while in Denver, but rarely do you get an abstract on anything. what's recorded, not recorded. You do research that vacant land that I have a house behind this house. I want to know what goes on it, the airplane path, those kinds of things, the buyer's responsibility on that. Then they're telling you that you have special taxing districts possibly in your taxes. Then you have a tax certificate. It comes at the same time as your title work in most cases, except usually in January or parts of February. But this is important because there are huge tax ramifications. If you're getting a new home or something is there, you want to be sure you know where your taxes are going and how much. And also it will tell you if you're the person that you're talking, the property that you're making the offer on, is this a senior discount on the taxes? So if you thought it was going to be $2,300 and now it becomes $3,300, that could create a problem for the buyer. So you want to be sure when you're taking a listing, do they have a senior discount on their taxes? That's a question to ask. So the rest of this is dealing with basically any third party. That's fine. We don't have that. Now we're getting into objection to title, resolution to title. Sometimes there's liens, IRS liens, mechanics lien, divorce situations, all kinds of things that happen that can lien against a property. So you always want to be sure you have that check. And that's why I require an owner encumbrance run on every property anybody lists. That way you search out if there's any liens against the property. So the title work, title advisory, now we go down to mineral rights and things of that nature. Mineral right review, most homes don't have it. If you have a property that would be east of Parker, it's a possibility they could have rights, but normally the answer is they don't, okay? So now you've got your this is a new ILC or a survey. Most homes, you don't really need it very often, but I always put it in. If you have a condo or townhome, you don't need to put anything in this one because it's not required. There's certain things in Adams County that you need a new ILC, and you got to put it in here to make sure. So if you have a single family dwelling, I always put it in here. It doesn't mean you're going to use the people who order this is the title company and or the lender. So who's going to pay for it? Make sure you've got it right and filled out appropriately, okay? And it goes to buyer's lender. Most of the time, we rarely order one, but every once in a while you do. If you don't have this filled out, it's going to come out to be an argument. And if you're the realtor, raise your hand because you're going to be the one who's paying for it. So let's start not trying to, let's try to cut down the amount of problems that we have to deal with by filling out the appropriate spaces in your contract. So now we have 10. 10 says you can have any kind of inspection you want as long as you don't destroy the property, okay? You don't have to put in your contract that property is being taken as is or where is or with all fault. It's already here, and you'll see many agents who put that in, but they don't read the contract because it's already in here. So again, you can have any kind of inspection you want. You have 2 dates. We'll talk about that next week. You have an inspection termination date. You have an inspection objection. Those two are the same dates. Then everybody gets to resolve whatever you've given the seller to get from point A to point B on whatever it may be. So then we ask them for, blank, 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 and blank, 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 and seller agrees or gives back and says, no, I don't want to do that. So you end up negotiating it out. So the rest of this, you have insurability. You want to make sure your insurance is in place and that you've got everything in the appropriate places so that you can get your property insured. So now you have, let's say we have a lease, you have a lease on the solar, has 15 years to go. You want to be sure that the seller will or will not assume. In this case, I checked it would. Most of the times they don't. And you want to be sure you have all the documentation involved in that. And that's where you fill it out appropriately. Then you have anything that in your objection, your resolution, again, due diligence. Most of the time, due diligence is not filled out with much, but if you have a basement that has been newly finished, and you want to see the permits, solar, it can be a lease on a hot water tank, a water softener system, could be anything, a number of things that could be. So if it's not there, you don't have to put any dates or information in there. On number 10.8, they don't acknowledge that they have seller's property disclosure. Most of the cases you will get one. Once in a while you will not. There's no well, but there could be. If there's a well, then you put the well permit number in here. So then you go down. The rest of this is dealing with lead-based paint. You can have anything tested for, you can have the paint tested for lead-based paint. Carbon monoxide detectors have to be in the property at the time of listing, within 15 feet of every sleeping area. I did have an inspection last week on a property my friend's buying, and they put the carbon monoxide detectors way up high. You need your carbon monoxide detectors about 6 inches off the floor. I don't know why they put them up so high, because by the time I got up there, you'd be dead. So we don't have a meth disclosure, but some companies have one. It's okay for your buyers to sign it if they want to. So now we go to closing instructions. You want to say is not included in this contract, but I'll show you where you put the information. A listing agent is who controls the listing. They're the one who will control what time you're going to close, and everybody tries to do by mutual agreement, but that's not what you put in here. You always put listing agent in here. So now we go down to transfer title. The only box you check is special warranty deed, period. The others do not count. It's rare that you have a personal representative deed, but you might in an estate sale. So 15 are dealing with different situations. So you have 15.2 is closing. You have a real estate side and you have a lending side. There's a fee that a title company charges for both of those. It usually ranges anywhere between $300 and $500. So usually half is a good thing to do. Status letters are usually, I always check sellers because they can get very expensive. Recording fees and things like that, I always put down seller. Any reserves or working capital, I put seller. Sometimes you can do half and half, but some of these reserve fees are upward of $1,000. So you have to be careful what kind of fees you're going to let your buyer pay. Other fees, you could either say half and half or seller, whatever is appropriate. And then you have local transfer fees, which again, we don't have here, but you can put seller or you can put NAs. Seller usage permit, again, we don't have them here, they do in the high country. So you can put seller or you can put NAs, whatever you'd like. Private transfer fee could be seller or NAs. Put something, do not leave those 3 paragraphs blank, 15.4, 15.5, 15.6. Always put something in 15.7 for the wire transfer. I usually put $150 in water district, and who's going to pay for it? Because I represent the buyer, I put seller. Utility transfer fees, they've started putting these fees in. I put down seller, or you can do half and half, whatever you think the most attractive part for your contract will be. Now we go to FERPA, which is foreign national. And this, when the person took the listing, the title company knows you don't have to check anything here. There is some documentation that the seller has to sign and pays the taxes. Colorado withholding could be up to 2% for a seller if they're snowbirds and they haven't lived in it more than 6 months on, 6 months off. Taxes, I always check most recent mill levy and most recent assessed value. That's pretty fair. We don't have rentals in this property, and no other, nothing else is going to be a prorated. 16.1.3. One of our agents recently got caught on this because they didn't put the word none at the end after and. And because there was a propane tank in, they ended up having to pay for the propane tank amount that was in that property. So be careful, make sure you fill in the appropriate blanks. If there's nothing, put the word none. That way you're not obligating your buyer to pay something they don't want to pay. 16.2, we always put special assessments. My area will have a special assessment shortly, and it's on the obligation of the seller. And we don't want anything other than the irregular assessments, so you put the word none. If you leave them blank and there's a problem, you're going to end up paying for them because you're the agent. You made the mistake. So please make sure everything is filled out appropriately. How much are you going to charge the seller if they don't get out of the property on time? I always make it $500. If it's if it's a blank property, I put $100 or $300 or something. But if it's occupied, I put $500. I want to make sure it's painful that they know that they have to be out of that property at the right time. If you're going to do a seller's post-closing occupancy agreement, you check this box and you submit it with your offer at the same time. 19, all the way through to, let's see, it's 28. Basically self-explanatory. It's about good faith funds, delivery, walkthroughs, home warranties, things like that. And then when you get to 29, this is where I put my transaction coordinator is Melissa, blah, blah, blah. This is saying to Mr. Seller, I got a transaction coordinator, you and Mr. Agent, and this is who will be contacting you about paperwork on this transaction. Then on 30.1.1, this is part of a contract: earnest money, source of water addendum, seller's property disclosure, closing instructions, lead-based paint disclosure if it applies. What's not part of this contract? Square footage, okay? These are the documents you should have and the buyer should sign appropriately. Everybody signs. Now we go down to where the agent is. You're the agent A working with the buyer. I don't have the earnest money. I'm representing him as a buyer's agent, and I get paid from the listing agent. All of this information should be filled out initially when you pick your program. This is the license number of the firm of Keller Williams Real Estate LLC, our office. And then you have yours with your license number. All of this should be automatically filled in. And then you have a broker working with the seller. They don't have the earnest money. They're representing a seller's agent, and they're going to be paid by the seller. You take and get this information out of RE Colorado. You're not going to get the license number, but you will get the office number from RE Colorado. And then everybody signs. Then you submit it and you send it over to the other agent. If it's a post-closing occupancy, you send that with at the time. Is there any questions at this point on this?
I do not have one.
Okay, everybody good? Great. All right, yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
On this section where it says source of water addendum, if they put it on seller's property disclosure.
I don't care. I always ask for a separate one anyway. And if the other agent doesn't have it and he has it only in the seller's property disclosure, that's okay too. But when you list a property in our office, you have to have both documents.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, now I'm going to tell you, I want you to go and use your own house, use a friend's house, and write a buy-sell contract and review it. I'm happy to look it over too if you want me to, but I want you to practice wanting what program I'm going to use, where to get it, and go to Real Fast and look it up and how do I fill it out. So that's important that you guys do that, okay? You have an amend extend that is used if there's any changes that need to be done. You also have extension or termination. This is used a little bit differently if you're trying to give an ultimatum to your buyers, okay, and sellers. Then post-closing occupancy, here's the document, you fill it out. You have, when you're written your offer, everybody's accepted. Now you go down to paragraph 8 is the most important. You have, well, I'm sorry, not 8. Let me go down 13, I think in this, yeah. If you're going to charge something per day, then you put the amount in there, will not prorate. You're going to have a deposit, could be anywhere from 500 to 3,000. Water is going to be done for seller. You're going to have gas and electric seller. And then 13 is the most important because you want to be sure that there's renter's insurance in this property if they're not going to be out on the day of closing, because their insurance stops on the day of closing and yours begin. So if it burnt down, you'd have insurance, but they wouldn't. So you want to be sure you have proof of this, okay? Whatever the security deposit is, I'm sorry, back up here, is if they don't vacate on time, it's the same number you put into the contract. Here is in case something happens within that first 1 through 60 days, you have a deposit. I would suggest strongly when you do your walkthrough, you have pictures of the walkthrough, and then when you go and collect your keys and return the deposit money, you also make sure the property's in good working order. So you, in additional provisions, you put buyer and seller shall exchange the keys and garage door openers on a certain date at a certain time. That way there is no discussion about who's going to get what. You can also throw in here the deposit money. If you have a title objection, here's the document we use. And to get it resolved, you say, hey, I've got an objection to it, and you try to resolve it. If you have an appraisal issue, you need to send the appraisal to the other agent along with this particular notice saying, I object to the appraisal. Okay, we did that one already. Boop, boop, boop. Buyer acknowledgement is if they choose not to get an inspection. I would encourage you to have them sign this document, or they don't want a home warranty. Make sure they sign this document to keep you out of trouble. You have people who go, well, you never told me that I could get that. Well, if you have them sign this, then you got proof. Hey, I told you, here it is. And this is just general information about a septic use permit. When you are in land and there is a septic and well on a piece of property, you have to get you have to ask the seller to get a septic use permit and make sure you require who's going to pay for it in your contract. If you're going to sell a personal property, you have to have, to keep your E&O insurance intact, you have to use seller's property disclosure. You have to put a home warranty on it. You have to make sure the buyer does an inspection or they sign the document saying they're not. And you have to use the Colorado State approved forms. This is to keep your errors and omissions documentation intact. And then if you don't, you have a $2,500 deductible if there's an issue. And we have, we strive to stay out of court. I don't particularly want to have anybody, I've got one for the first time in 3 years open, so that I don't know where that's going, but the most the agent will do right now is $2,500 in that particular dispute. If you have a well on a property, this is just a checklist that a seller can fill out for a buyer for general information. Other than that, what kind of question? Oh, the notice to terminate is to say, hey, listen, I had my inspection, I don't like it, I'm terminating. And you send earnest money release at the same time. Who has any questions?
No.
It's a lot to take in, I know, but you can come to this class as often as you want.
I have a question now.
Sure.
If the buyer didn't do an inspection and went for a walkthrough and found out that, you know, this one concerns the land, plot of land, and the buyer finds out that he couldn't identify the location of the land, what does the buyer do?
If he doesn't go through with it, he'll probably lose his earnest money, but he should have known that before he should have had some kind of walkthrough or identification saying where the boundaries were. That's why you get an ILC or a new survey.
Mhm.
He should have asked the seller for a survey, a new survey, or get a new ILC for the seller to do that. That's the fault of the buyer.
Now, what if the seller falsified the document? What happens?
I'd tell him to consult an attorney
Okay,
because I don't know what's going to happen. So
okay, thank you.
I can guess what's going to happen, but I'm not going to tell you.
Okay, thanks.
I didn't get my attorney's license lately, so there you go. Okay, anybody else got something? If not, go find out where you can write a contract. Make sure you do it according to the way we went through today. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call me or your advisor. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Yep, see you next week. Bye-bye.